Red Bluff sat in the crook of a canyon like a wound in the land, its buildings cracked and sun-bleached, its people quiet and weather-worn. The wind that passed through town carried more dust than mercy, and by the time the sun reached its blood-orange descent, everything it touched seemed to smolder. It was then the stranger arrived. He rode in alone, a tall figure atop a lean dun horse, coat flapping behind him like a tattered flag. His face was half shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but the townsfolk caught sight of his eyes, and they remembered them. Not the color, not the shape, but the way they burned, like coals in a dying fire that refused to go out. Children hushed mid-play as he passed. Old men leaned on their canes a little heavier, and Martha Jane, standing on the steps of the general store with a sack of flour hugged to her chest, felt her throat tighten. She didn't know him, but something in her stomach turned, a feeling she hadn't known in 5 long years. The stranger rode straight through town, didn't tip his hat, didn't speak. Only the iron rhythm of his horse's hooves spoke for him, echoing through Red Bluff like a ticking clock. He stopped outside the livery and dismounted without ceremony. "Feed him, rub him down. He'll kick if you rush it," he said, voice deep, rasped by miles of silence. The stable boy, barely 13, nodded and backed away like he'd been handed a rattler. The stranger handed him 2 silver coins, one more than the boy usually saw in a month, and walked off toward the boarding house. At the front desk, he signed only an X. When the keeper asked if he planned to stay long, the man said, "Long enough." Upstairs, in a small room with a warped window and a bed that creaked when you looked at it, he unpacked. Not much, a whetstone, a rolled blanket, a half-empty pouch of tobacco, and from under his coat, a long, narrow bundle wrapped in oilcloth. He set it gently on the bed, then walked to the window and watched the sun finish dying behind the canyon rim. Down below, Martha Jane lingered outside the store longer than usual. Widowhood had made her cautious, wary of newcomers, especially ones who didn't speak their name. 5 years ago, her brother had ridden out with a shotgun and a promise to stop Clay Mercer and his gang from robbing the Wells Fargo. He never came back. They said Mercer left no survivors. They said Luke's body had been dumped in the desert, picked clean by coyotes and sun. But as the stranger disappeared into the shadows of the boarding house, something pulled at her. The way he moved, the way he seemed to measure each step. Something familiar in the way he looked at nothing but saw everything. Sheriff Tomlinson found her there, still watching the street. "You all right, Martha?" She nodded slow. "That man, he say his name. Didn't offer it. Not sure I wanted to ask." The sheriff's voice lacked its usual certainty. He scratched under his collar and looked up at the darkening sky. "Mercer's due back. Got wind his boys are sniffing around Dry Basin. Could mean nothing. Could mean they're coming to finish the job." Martha said nothing. She tightened her shawl and turned back toward her home, her boots crunching through the dust. The next morning came with a strange kind of silence, as if the town were holding its breath. The stranger walked to the smithy just after dawn, carrying a blade wrapped in leather. He spoke to the blacksmith in quiet tones, pointing, measuring. By noon, he'd sharpened the blade himself, sleeves rolled, hands moving with the calm of a man who'd done this more times than he could count. Children watched him from corners, whispering guesses about who he might be. A bounty hunter, a former outlaw, maybe even a ghost. The sheriff approached him on Main Street that afternoon. "I don't know what your business is here, mister, but this town's got its own troubles." "So I hear. Mercer's men don't ask questions. If you're looking to settle something, you best take it elsewhere." The stranger looked up, and for a moment, Tomlinson's hand hovered near his gun. But the man only nodded. "I'm not here to start trouble, but if it comes looking, I won't run from it." Tomlinson exhaled, rubbed his temple. "You got a name at all?" The man looked past him, toward the hills. "Not one that matters." That night, Martha's lamp burned late. She couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. The stranger had passed her again near the post office, and for the briefest second, their gazes met. It was like a door in her memory had creaked open, revealing a dark room she'd locked up long ago. She found herself digging through her trunk, pulling out old letters, worn photos. her brother's handwriting still smudged by the rain. The stranger ate alone at the saloon. Didn't drink, didn't play cards. He watched the doors, the mirrors, the men who spoke too loud, the ones who kept their hands too close to their coats. When he left, 2 men followed him out. They wore dust-colored coats and boots too clean for cowboys. Mercer scouts, no doubt. But by the time the bartender reached the doorway to see where they'd gone, all 3 were gone, swallowed by the dark. In the morning, someone found one of the men face down near the riverbank, neck broken. The other was never seen again. Whispers ran through Red Bluff like wildfire. Some folks packed wagons. Others cleaned their rifles. Martha Jane, meanwhile, sat on her porch staring into the rising sun, a mug of cold coffee untouched in her hands. She didn't know what the stranger wanted, but something in her heart, old and aching, told her this wasn't about bounty or gold or glory. This was about something lost, something buried, and soon enough it would rise again. The land around Red Bluff held its memories like bones under sand, hidden, silent, waiting to be unearthed. Martha Jane had long learned to walk past them, but with the stranger's arrival, each day seemed to stir the dirt a little more. She couldn't shake the shape of him, how his shoulders squared not with pride, but burden, how he moved like a man who didn't care if death found him, only that it didn't come too soon. And those eyes, they haunted her more than they should have. It was wrong, she told herself, to keep staring at a stranger. But the heart doesn't follow logic. It remembers in strange ways. In the mornings, she found herself watching the street, as if drawn by instinct. The stranger always passed at the same hour, as regular as the town clock, heading toward the edge of town where the brush grew thick, and old stones marked graves with names worn away. He walked like someone who wasn't just visiting the past, but belonged to it. One afternoon, Martha followed. She stayed back at first, footsteps careful, dress brushing against dry sage. He knelt near a patch of bare earth behind the churchyard fence, where no headstone stood. Just a crude wooden cross, weather-bitten and half-sunk. He didn't speak, didn't pray. Just sat there, shoulders still, hands folded as if holding back a flood. When he rose, he saw her. They locked eyes again, and something passed between them. Grief, maybe. Recognition, maybe not. She looked down. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You didn't," he said quietly. "This spot, it mattered to you?" "It did," she replied. "My brother was buried there. Or should have been. There was no body to bring home." The stranger nodded once. "Then it matters." They stood there in silence, the wind lifting dust around their boots, until he turned and walked away. That night, Martha opened the cedar chest at the foot of her bed, for the first time in years. Inside were fragments of another life, a faded red kerchief, a cracked silver comb, and letters tied in twine. Letters from Luke, her younger brother, full of dreams and promises. In the last one, he'd written of confronting Clay Mercer, not for revenge, but to protect the town he called home. That letter was dated 5 years past. No more came after. Folks still whispered about the day Mercer's gang rode through like a sandstorm. The sheriff had been outnumbered, the bank emptied, 2 deputies left bleeding in the dust. And Luke, bold, foolish Luke, rode out after them alone. His horse came back 3 days later, riderless and wild-eyed. There'd been no search party. Mercer's gang left no witnesses. The stranger didn't come into town the next day. Martha tried not to notice. She swept her porch, fetched water, fed the hens. But her eyes kept drifting to the road. The absence unsettled her more than she expected. Near sundown, someone banged on her door. "Mrs. Jane," Sheriff Tomlinson called, hat in hand. "You ought to stay at the church tonight." She stepped outside, frowning. "Why?" "We found tracks near your property. Boot prints, horseshoes. Not ours." Her grip tightened on the railing. "Mercer's men. Looks like someone's been watching. Barn's got cut fences. Couple chickens gone. We'll have 2 men posted nearby." But he didn't finish. She packed quickly. As she turned to lock the door, she caught movement from the tree-line. A figure stepped out, coat dusty, eyes glowing faint in the dying light. "Stay with the others," the stranger said, voice low. "Tonight's not safe." Martha met his gaze. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. She studied him for a long moment. "You came here for more than ghosts." He said nothing. "Was it Mercer?" His jaw tensed. "I've been tracking them for a long time." "You've killed men." He didn't flinch. "Men who earned it." Her voice softened. "Why warn me?" He looked past her, toward the house. "They think you're vulnerable, that no one remembers." She hesitated, then stepped toward him. "You speak like someone who does remember." He finally met her eyes again. "Maybe I do." That night, Martha stayed at the church with a handful of townsfolk. The pews were hard, the air thick with sweat and unease. Around midnight, a dull roar echoed through the hills, gunshots. 3 in quick succession, then silence. By dawn, the sheriff rode out with 2 deputies. They found 3 men sprawled near Martha's property, rifles scattered. One clung to life, babbling nonsense. His face was bloodied, eyes wide. He moved like smoke. The man whispered. "Wasn't human, those eyes, same as the boy we left for dead." The stranger was gone by morning. Only tracks remained, leading back into the canyons. When Martha returned home, she found her barn door repaired, her hens fed. On her porch sat a single object, a red kerchief, faded and folded neat. She picked it up with trembling fingers, brought it to her chest. Her knees buckled slowly as the truth settled in her bones. Luke, no proof, no certainty, but her heart screamed it louder than reason could hush. That night, she sat by the fire, hands wrapped around the kerchief, watching the window. Not in fear, but in hope. Something had returned to Red Bluff, and it wasn't done yet. The wind howled through Red Bluff's canyon rim, like a memory trying to speak. The townsfolk went about their business, with more watchful eyes now, glancing toward shadows and listening too long to the silence. Word of the night gunfire had crawled through the town like wildfire, and though no one said it aloud, many suspected something unnatural had stirred the dust. Sheriff Tomlinson stood in the general store, palming a tin of coffee, with a distant look. 3 men dead, he muttered to himself. 3 Mercer men, slit clean like cattle at the rail yard. His fingers drummed against the tin. Across the room, Martha Jane gathered flour and beans into her basket. She didn't speak. She hadn't said much to anyone since that morning on the porch. Folks noticed the kerchief tucked into her blouse, red as rust, but no one dared ask. Tomlinson's voice broke the quiet. "You still believe your brother's gone?" She didn't flinch. "I believe what I saw." He nodded slowly. "The man they left for dead, he must have crawled through hell to get back here." "If he even left," she said. Then she left the store without looking back. The stranger hadn't returned, not in the visible sense, but traces of him lingered in the stillness of dusk, in the twitch of every door hinge, in the quiet, too careful hush that settled over the town. Red Bluff had long ago learned to live with fear, but now fear had company, and its name was vengeance. Martha found herself walking the path behind the church again, her boots kicking up familiar dust. The makeshift grave lay undisturbed. No new flowers, no footprints, just silence. A voice broke it. "Used to talk to him right here." She turned sharply. A boy stood nearby, Tommy Webb, no older than 12. Hat too big, boots too small. "Who?" she asked, stepping closer. "Luke," the boy said. "Used to sit with me after school. Told stories. Showed me how to draw horses real proper." Martha stared. "Luke did that?" The boy nodded. "Said he'd come back one day. Told me if I ever saw a man with fire in his eyes and a limp in his step, I should tell him the river still runs beneath the stones." She knelt to meet the boy's eyes. "What does that mean?" The boy shrugged. "I don't know. He just said that's how he'd know it was time." Martha's throat tightened. She wanted to cry, but didn't. The boy looked too young to carry such weight. That night, the church bell rang. Not for prayer, not for marriage, not for mourning, but as a warning. Riders had been seen on the horizon. 5 of them. Black coats, black horses, rifles at their sides. Mercer's colors. And leading them, Mercer himself. The town braced. Windows boarded. Children hidden. Rifles dusted off from cellars. Tomlinson stood on the edge of Main Street, flanked by 2 deputies and a handful of ranch hands with more grit than aim. And then, before the riders reached the edge of town, a lone figure stepped into the road. Martha watched from the general store balcony, breath frozen in her lungs. It was him, the stranger. No hat, no horse. Just a coat weathered to the threads and a quiet fury radiating from his every step. Mercer slowed. The riders behind him reined in. "Well, I'll be," Mercer drawled, leaning forward in the saddle. "Didn't we bury you in a ravine, boy?" The stranger didn't answer. Mercer grinned. "You sure picked the wrong town to haunt. We're here for the safe. And maybe a little sport." The stranger kept walking, slowly. "You're not taking the safe." Mercer laughed. "Who says?" "I do." He stopped 10 paces away. The wind carried silence between them. "You always were a mouthy runt," Mercer said. "Had to show everyone how brave you were." "I wasn't brave," the stranger said, voice low and flat. "I was just late to understand how justice works out here." Mercer raised his hand, and that's when it happened. The stranger moved. It wasn't fast. It wasn't loud. But somehow, before anyone else could draw breath, 2 of Mercer's men were off their horses, groaning on the ground, blood soaking the dust. A third fired wildly, missed. The stranger's shot sent the man sprawling. The last rider bolted. Mercer sat alone now. His face had drained of color. "You can't be him," he whispered. "I was the boy you buried," the stranger said. "Now I'm the man who remembers." Mercer reached for his gun. Too slow. One shot rang out. He fell. The street stood still. No cheer. No shouts. Just awe. Martha stepped from the store, hands trembling, and walked toward the man. As he holstered his weapon, she reached him. "Luke." His eyes softened, not with sorrow, but peace. "Martha." Her breath caught. "How?" "Wasn't time to die," he said. "Not until this was done." She reached for his hand, and he let her. "You don't have to run anymore," she whispered. He looked past her, toward the canyon beyond town. Maybe not. But he didn't say if he'd stay. The town of Red Bluff would never forget that day. And though Luke Jane might ride on again, his legend had taken root, in the heart of his sister, and in the silence he left behind. Morning in Red Bluff arrived like a held breath. Pale light spilled across the canyon walls, casting long shadows down the deserted Main Street. Not a soul stirred. Windows remained shuttered. Smoke curled listlessly from chimneys, as if afraid to rise too high. Inside the church, Martha Jane lit a lone candle. The flame flickered uncertainly, as if sensing what loomed. Her hands trembled, but not with fear. Something colder had settled in her bones, acceptance. Her brother was back. The Mercer gang was shattered, but the fire Luke carried hadn't gone out, and that meant the story wasn't over. Sheriff Tomlinson found Luke seated behind the saloon, cleaning the chamber of a battered Colt. The old lawman studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You done enough," he said finally. "Folks here, they owe you their peace." Luke didn't look up. "They don't owe me anything. I didn't come back for them." "Then who?" Luke snapped the chamber shut and met Tomlinson's eyes. "For her, and for what was taken." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Mercer's boys are running scared, but they ain't gone. Word is, his older brother rides in tonight. Warren Mercer." Luke stilled. That name carried weight. Warren had been the one who'd called the shot to bury Luke alive. He was older, meaner, and not prone to mistakes. "He doesn't send threats," Tomlinson continued. "When he rides in, it's to finish something." Luke stood. "Then we finish it together." The sun had not yet reached its peak when the first riders appeared on the horizon. 6 of them, dressed in dust-colored coats, rifles strapped to their saddles. At the center rode Warren Mercer, a man built like a brick wall, with gray at his temples and no smile to offer the world. Red Bluff emptied, doors locked, curtains drawn, but behind every shutter, eyes watched. Luke stood in the street, coat flapping in the wind. At his side, Martha stood tall. She wore no gun, just her brother's old duster, and a red kerchief tied firm around her neck. Tomlinson and 2 deputies joined them. The sheriff clutched his rifle tighter than ever before. Warren dismounted first, walking forward with slow, deliberate steps. His boots crunched on gravel. "You the ghost I've been hearing about?" he asked, voice like gravel rubbed raw. Luke said nothing. Warren's gaze slid to Martha. "Sister, huh? Pretty thing. Shame she's stuck in a hole like this." Luke's hand twitched near his hip. "Tell you what," Warren drawled. "Lay down your gun, and I'll let her walk." Martha stepped forward, chin high. "I'm not the one you should worry about." Warren smirked. "Oh, I'm not worried. I'm just here to bury another Jane." That was when Luke moved. The street exploded in motion. Luke's revolver barked once, twice. 2 riders dropped before their rifles could rise. Warren lunged sideways, drawing as he rolled. Bullets screamed past Luke's shoulder. Tomlinson returned fire, dropping another man from his saddle. Martha ducked behind a barrel as slugs chipped wood around her. Her eyes locked on Warren, who was circling toward Luke's blind side. "Luke!" she shouted. Her brother turned a second too late. Warren fired. Luke stumbled, spun, and dropped to one knee. Martha screamed. Warren advanced, cold eyes locked on his target. "Told you. Should have stayed dead." He raised his revolver, but a shot rang out, not his. Warren staggered back. Martha stood, the sheriff's backup rifle braced against her shoulder, smoke curling from the barrel. "Should have left me alone," she said, breathless. Warren's legs gave out. He fell hard, the dust swallowing him whole. Silence reigned. Then the sound of Luke's breath, ragged, but present. Martha ran to him. He clutched his side, blood staining his shirt, but he was alive. "You okay?" she asked, tears springing free. He gave a crooked smile. "Bullet grazed me. Just enough to remind me I'm still human." Tomlinson joined them, helping Luke to his feet. "Town's safe now," he said quietly. "What's left of the Mercer gang won't come back. Not after this." Luke's gaze swept the street. The dust, the blood, the stillness. Then he looked at Martha. "I can't stay," he said. Her face fell. "Why not?" "Because what they did, it wasn't just to me. There are others out there. Folks with no one to stand for them. And I've still got breath." Tears welled in her eyes. "You found your peace here." He reached out and touched the red kerchief at her neck. "You're my peace. That's why I can leave it with you." A long silence passed between them, the kind that felt sacred. Martha nodded, finally. "Then go. But don't you vanish again." He gave a slight nod, then looked to the sheriff. "Tell folks not to fear the next stranger who rides into town. He might be looking for justice." With that, he turned, walked past the fallen, and mounted one of the gang's horses. As he rode out toward the canyon's edge, the sun dipped low, casting his shadow long across the earth. In Red Bluff, the wind picked up again, carrying with it a new kind of legend. Not just of a gunslinger, not just of vengeance, but of a family broken, then made whole, by a man who refused to die, and a sister who refused to let the past own her future.